Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll be looking at who the Wheezing Demon is. One of the most unsettling creatures in the Insidious universe is the demon that haunts Quinn Brenner in Insidious Chapter 3. Known as the Man Who Can't Breathe, or the Wheezing Demon, this entity is a malevolent spirit that clings to the living, weakening them until it completely possesses them. Unlike other demons in the franchise, this being does not simply seek to terrify its victims. It aims to consume them slowly, draining their life force, while keeping them trapped in a state of constant suffering. That's why, in this video, we'll take an in-depth look at the history and nature of this demon. We'll explore its appearance in the movie, its grotesque physical form, its dark personality, and its terrifying supernatural abilities. The story begins with Quinn Brenner, a young woman going through one of the hardest moments of her life, the loss of her mother, Lily. Her mother's absence has left a massive void in her life, and while she tries to move forward, the feeling of loneliness and the longing to hear her mother's voice again consume her. Unlike her father, Sean, who tries to focus on the present and his family's well-being, Quinn is convinced that Lily is still close to her. That's why, in secret, she has been trying to communicate with her spirit, speaking into the darkness of her room and looking for signs of her presence. At first, it seems like there's no response, but soon, Quinn begins to notice strange occurrences, subtle noises, the feeling of being watched, and, on some occasions, a faint echo of her name whispered in the air. Convinced that her mother is trying to reach out to her, Quinn seeks professional help and turns to Elise Rainier, a renowned psychic and medium, hoping she can help her establish contact with her mother in the afterlife. Quinn visits Elise at her home and explains her situation, telling her about the pain she feels after her mother's death and the signs she has perceived. Elise, though moved by her story, hesitates to help. She has long since stopped using her abilities due to a traumatic encounter with a malevolent entity in the Further. However, Quinn's sincerity and suffering make her reconsider. She decides to hold a seance with the young woman to try to contact Lily. During the session, Elise enters a trance and attempts to establish a connection with Quinn's mother's spirit. At first, there is an eerie silence, but soon, the atmosphere in the room changes. Something begins to respond. However, what Elise perceives is not the comforting energy of a loving mother, but a dark, sickly presence. Instead of Lily's voice, she hears distorted whispers and feels an intense cold creeping through the room. Suddenly, a disturbing image appears in her mind. An old man in a hospital, his pale skin covered in darkened veins. He is connected to an oxygen mask, but instead of helping him breathe, it seems to be draining something from him, as if he were absorbing life rather than receiving it. Elise immediately realizes that this is not Lily's spirit, but something entirely different, something evil. Horrified by the entity she has just perceived, Elise immediately breaks the connection and pulls away from the table, struggling to breathe. She looks at Quinn with a serious expression and tells her she must stop. She warns her that when someone tries to communicate with the dead, it's not just the souls of loved ones that can answer. Dark entities also lurk, waiting for an opportunity to cross into the world of the living. By opening that door, Quinn has attracted something dangerous. Elise, visibly shaken by the experience, refuses to continue. Fear grips her because she knows that the presence she felt in the Further is not just a wandering spirit, but a predator that feeds on suffering. She insists that Quinn stop trying to contact her mother, because if she keeps reaching out, she might end up attracting something she cannot control. Quinn, though frightened by Elise's warning, cannot accept the idea of never speaking to her mother again. In her mind, she believes that maybe the medium was simply scared and gave up too soon. Her desire for a sign from her mother is stronger than her fear. So, ignoring Elise's words, she decides to keep trying to communicate with Lily on her own. That same night, Quinn sits in her room in the dark and speaks to her mother once again. But in the silence that follows, she doesn't realize that she is no longer alone. At that moment, the man who can't breathe sets his sights on her. After her attempts to contact her mother and ignoring Elise's warning, Quinn begins to notice strange things happening around her. At first, they seem like coincidences or minor occurrences, but as the days pass, they become more unsettling and terrifying. Every night, as she tries to sleep, she hears dull thuds on the walls of her room. At first, she thinks it's the neighbors, but the sounds seem to come from different spots in the room, as if something is moving within the walls. More than once, she feels a presence in the darkness. She can't see it clearly, but she has the unsettling sensation that something is in her room, silently watching her. One day, while home alone, she leaves her laptop open and steps away for a moment. When she returns, she finds the screen on and fingerprints in the dust on the keyboard, as if someone had been touching it without her permission. The events continue to escalate, but Quinn tries to ignore them, convincing herself that it's just her imagination. However, the entity stalking her has only just begun its hunt. One night, Quinn decides to go for a walk to clear her mind. As she walks, she feels like someone is watching her. But when she turns her head, no one is there. A few blocks from her house, as she stops at an intersection, she sees a disturbing figure on the other side of the street. It's a tall, thin man wearing a hospital gown. His skin is pale and sickly, and his face appears partially covered by an oxygen mask. The most unsettling thing is that he is completely still, his eyes locked onto her. Quinn blinks, and in an instant, the figure is gone. A chill runs down her spine. Picking up her pace, she tries to ignore what she just saw. But from that moment on, the apparitions become more intense. Shortly after that encounter on the street, the demon decides to strike for the first time. Quinn is outside her house, sending a message on her phone while waiting to cross the street. In an instant, she feels something invisible shove her with brutal force. Her body is thrown forward, directly into the road. Within seconds, a speeding car crashes into her violently. Quinn is sent sprawling onto the ground with a horrifying sound of bones breaking. Her vision blurs from the pain as the world around her turns into chaos, screams, honking horns, and panic. When she wakes up, she's in the hospital. Her legs are completely casted. Both are broken in multiple places. The doctor tells her she will need weeks, maybe months, to recover. Now, she is entirely dependent on her family and must remain at home, bedridden, unable to move. But what Quinn doesn't know is that the accident wasn't just an unfortunate event. It was orchestrated by the demon. It left her vulnerable, defenseless, trapped in her room, exactly where he wanted her. From the moment she returns home, the demon's torment becomes far more aggressive. He no longer just lurks in the shadows. He now seeks to break her mind and body. In the middle of the night, Quinn hears her name whispered near her ear. But when she opens her eyes, the room is empty. At times, she sees shadows moving in the corners of her vision. But when she turns her head, nothing is there. During the day, the cast on her legs begins to feel heavier, as if something invisible is pressing down on it. One night, Quinn wakes up to the sensation of weight on her body. Something is in her bed. She tries to move, but she can't. Her eyes widen in horror as she sees a dark figure leaning over her face. It's the same man in the hospital gown, the man who can't breathe. The demon stares at her through his oxygen mask, and suddenly, without warning, he grabs her and drags her out of bed. Quinn crashes onto the floor with a painful thud, unable to move due to her broken legs. She tries to scream, but no sound comes out. The last thing she sees before losing consciousness is the demon slowly approaching her, like a predator savoring its prey before devouring it. From that moment on, the entity's torment will only grow worse. As the days pass, the demon's presence in Quinn's life intensifies. It is no longer just a shadow in the dark or a figure in the distance. Now it is inside her room, moving freely, feeding on her suffering. This entity, known as the man who can't breathe or the Wheezing Demon, is more than just a malevolent spirit. It is a being that thrives on the pain and despair of its victims, slowly weakening them until they can no longer resist. Its ultimate goal is to subjugate Quinn's soul, rip it from her body, and drag it into the further, where it will condemn her to an eternity of torment. For the first time, Quinn sees it clearly in her room. It is no longer just a shadow or a vague presence, but a tangible, deformed, and terrifying figure. He is an old man with ashen skin and dark veins running across his face. His body is thin and frail, as if he were on the verge of death, yet his presence radiates a malignant and powerful energy. His breathing is forced and ragged, amplified by a yellowed oxygen mask connected to an old, filthy tube. But instead of helping him breathe, it seems to be draining energy from his own body, as if his existence depends on absorbing the vitality of others. He wears a torn and faded hospital gown, suggesting that in life, he may have been sick or near death for an extended period. Quinn freezes at the sight of him, feeling an inhuman cold run through her body. Her instincts scream at her to flee, but she can't. She is trapped in her own bed, completely vulnerable to the entity that haunts her. The demon stares at her. It does not need to speak. Its presence alone conveys its purpose. It wants her soul. The attacks of the man who can't breathe escalate more and more. It is no longer satisfied with scaring her or tormenting her psychologically. Now, it wants to break her completely. Dragged out of bed, one night, as she tries to sleep, Quinn feels a weight pressing down on her body. Suddenly, an invisible force grabs her and violently pulls her out of bed. She crashes onto the floor with a painful thud, her legs immobilized in casts. The pain is unbearable, but the worst part is the sensation of something looming over her, breathing heavily in the darkness. Manifestations in broad daylight. It no longer needs darkness to appear. In the middle of the day, Quinn sees him standing in the corner of her room, motionless, his oxygen mask emitting a rhythmic, terrifying sound. When she blinks, he is closer. He starts appearing behind her in the reflection of the mirror. Sometimes, her own voice distorts, as if her mother were speaking to her from beyond the grave. The doors in the house slam shut on their own, and the lights flicker. On one occasion, he tries to suffocate her by pressing his mask against her face, as if attempting to drain her life force. Each attack is stronger than the last, and Quinn begins to feel weaker, not just physically but mentally as well. The man who can't breathe does not just want to torment her, he wants to take her to the further. His strategy is clear: emotionally weaken her, making her believe she is losing her mind, break her will, attacking her relentlessly until she surrenders, spiritually drag her into the further, where she will be trapped, condemned to suffer for eternity. Quinn starts to notice that at certain moments, her room no longer feels the same. Sometimes the atmosphere changes, the light dims, and the air becomes heavier. During those moments, she has the unsettling feeling that she is no longer in her world, but in an in-between place, as if she is unintentionally crossing over into the further. Each time this happens, the demon is there, closer, stronger, waiting for the exact moment to take her. And Quinn, growing more exhausted, realizes that if she doesn't find help soon, she won't be able to resist much longer. Quinn's situation has become unsustainable. Her father, Sean Brenner, has witnessed the horrors his daughter is experiencing, but he doesn't know how to stop them. Quinn's wounds haven't healed, and her health worsens with each passing day. The family is on the verge of collapse, and time is running out. Desperate to save his daughter, Sean seeks help wherever he can. That's how he comes into contact with two paranormal investigators known for documenting supernatural events, Tucker and Specs. Tucker and Specs are a duo of paranormal investigators who specialize in gathering evidence of spectral activity. However, despite their experience with supernatural cases, they quickly realize that this case is far more dangerous than they anticipated. They set up cameras and sensors in the Brenner house, but what they record is terrifying. Shadows moving inexplicably, doors slamming shut on their own, and a dark figure briefly appearing in the footage before vanishing. Specs attempts to communicate with the entity through audio recordings, but all they capture are distorted whispers and the sound of heavy breathing. The same breathing Quinn has heard every night. When they tried to get closer to the case, Tucker is violently thrown against a wall by an invisible force. They soon realize they are dealing with something far more powerful than any entity they've encountered before. Tucker and Specs know they are out of their league. If anyone can help Quinn, it's Elise Rainier, the most powerful medium they know. However, there's a problem. Elise has retired from her work as a medium. After the events of her past, she decided to step away from the paranormal world because every time she tried to help someone, she faced increasingly dangerous entities. Moreover, her last encounter with the Further left her scarred with fear, a fear that, for the first time in her life, has paralyzed her. When Tucker and Specs find her and explain Quinn's situation, Elise hesitates. She doesn't want to return to the Further. She doesn't want to face another dark entity. She fears that this time, she won't be able to come back. However, something about Quinn's story deeply moves her. She knows this young woman is in grave danger, and that if she does nothing, the demon will take her soul forever. Despite her fear, Elise agrees to go to the Brenner house and assess the situation. Elise returns to Quinn's house, but the moment she steps through the door, she feels an overwhelming presence. The atmosphere is heavy, and the dark energy seems to suffocate every corner. She immediately realizes that this is not just a wandering spirit, it is something far worse. She decides to use her gift to enter the Further and discover what is truly happening. But once inside, something unexpected occurs. Among the shadows of the Further, Elise not only finds the demon, she also encounters a familiar spirit, her late husband, Jack. Jack speaks to her gently, reminding her that her gift is important and that she has been a light in the darkness for many people. He tells her she cannot let fear control her, and that she must continue helping those in need. This encounter restores her confidence. Elise regains her courage and decides to fight. She knows she can't keep running. She knows Quinn needs her. So when she returns to reality, she looks at Sean Brenner and says with determination, "I'm going to bring your daughter back, now without fear." Elise prepares to face the man who can't breathe. She arms herself with her knowledge, her connection to the spirit world, and the help of Tucker and Specs. It won't be an easy battle, but for the first time in a long while, Elise feels ready to return to the Further and fight the darkness once again. Elise knows that the only way to save Quinn is to face the demon on its own ground. Quinn is no longer just under its influence. Her soul has been taken and trapped in the Further, a dark, timeless place where lost souls remain imprisoned forever. With the help of Tucker and Specs, Elise prepares the ritual to enter the Further and rescue the young woman. Elise sits in a chair in Quinn's room. She closes her eyes and enters a deep trance. In an instant, her spirit leaves her physical body and awakens in the Further, a world of shadows where everything appears as a distorted version of reality. As she walks through the place, she realizes the energy is darker than anything she has ever felt before. The air is heavy, and each step brings her closer to the epicenter of evil. As Elise ventures deeper into the spirit realm, she finds Quinn, but not as the young woman she once knew. Her skin is pale, and her eyes are empty, as if she no longer has a will of her own. Her body is bound by shadows that keep her imprisoned. Elise tries to get closer, but a figure emerges from the darkness. The man who can't breathe, The demon stands between them, staring at her with his sunken eyes and rotting skin. His oxygen mask emits an agonizing sound with each breath. He doesn't need to speak. His mere presence radiates deep hatred, an insatiable hunger. Elise understands that the demon has completely taken Quinn's soul and has no intention of letting her go without a fight. Elise knows she can't simply snatch Quinn away. She has to face him. The demon attacks with all his fury. The shadows of the further writhe and lunge at Elise, trying to drag her into the darkness. The man who can't breathe strikes her with supernatural force, hurling her to the ground. The voices of other trapped souls whisper in her ear, trying to weaken her will. But Elise refuses to surrender. Gathering all her strength, she uses her connection to the spirit world to project her inner light and resist the demon's assault. As her energy grows, the demon recoils, enraged by the presence of a force he cannot corrupt. Just when the battle reaches its most critical point, a warm light appears in the darkness. It is the spirit of Lilith Brenner, Quinn's mother. Lilith manifests with a radiant energy filled with the love and protection of a mother who will not allow her daughter to be taken by the darkness. She approaches Quinn, gently touches her, and whispers words of love and strength. The connection with her mother breaks the chains that held her prisoner. Quinn, still weak, begins to regain her essence. The demon, furious, tries to attack once more, but the combined presence of Lilith and Elise is too powerful for him. With her last ounce of strength, Elise channels her spiritual energy to banish the demon from the further. The man who can't breathe lets out a rage-filled scream as his hold over Quinn crumbles. The shadows scatter, and the dark presence begins to fade. In a final attempt to cling to the further, the demon tries to sink into the darkness, but he is ultimately cast out. With the creature defeated, Quinn's soul is finally free. In the real world, Quinn's body convulses violently as her spirit returns. Her eyes snap open. Her breathing returns to normal. The marks left by the demon's presence fade from her skin. When she finally awakens, the first thing she feels is a sense of relief and peace. The torment is over. Exhausted but satisfied, Elise confirms that the demon has been defeated and that Quinn is no longer in danger. The young woman has been saved. With the exorcism complete, Quinn begins her recovery. Though the trauma of what she endured remains, her life gradually returns to normal. Her bond with her father grows stronger. Tucker and Specs, impressed by Elise's bravery, decide to continue working with her. Elise, knowing she will face more threats in the future, accepts her destiny as a medium and protector against darkness. However, even though the demon has been defeated, Elise knows that the further is still lurking, filled with other entities waiting for their chance to cross into the world of the living. The danger never truly disappears. And now that we've thoroughly covered his story, I want to talk about the man who can't breathe, his physical appearance, what we know about his personality and behavior, and his incredible abilities and known weaknesses. The man who can't breathe has a disturbing appearance that evokes the image of a terminal patient desperately clinging to life. His presence is imposing and reflects his eternal suffering. A thin and gaunt body with grayish, sickly skin, as if he were on the verge of death. Sunken, dark eyes, devoid of humanity, radiating deep hatred. He wears an oxygen mask connected to a tank, producing a raspy, mechanical breathing sound with every inhale. He is dressed in a dirty old hospital gown, suggesting that in life, he was a sick patient who died in a state of extreme suffering. Skeletal hands with long, sharp nails, which he uses to grab and drag his victims. An erratic gait, with slow yet menacing movements, as if his body were on the brink of collapse. The combination of these features makes his presence unsettling and oppressive, as he appears to be a living corpse condemned to an existence of endless pain. Unlike other entities in Insidious, this demon does not act with haste or uncontrolled fury. Instead, his behavior is cold, calculating, and patient. He does not attack immediately, but rather plays with his victims, weakening them psychologically before trapping them. He does not need to make noise or display direct aggression at first. He lurks in the shadows and appears at strategic moments to instill terror. He seeks vulnerable victims and subjects them to a spiral of fear and despair. Once he chooses his prey, he never lets go. His ultimate goal is to weaken them enough to drag them into the further and enslave their soul. Unlike other spirits that can be temporarily warded off, this demon does not give up easily. His personality is a blend of cruel patience and relentless brutality, making him a terrifying and formidable antagonist. This demon is not just an ordinary ghostly entity. It possesses abilities that make it a serious threat to any medium or unsuspecting victim. He can drag Quinn out of her bed and throw her to the ground effortlessly. He can grip his victims with immense pressure, completely immobilizing them. In his domain, he can trap and manipulate souls, as he did with Quinn. He can alter the perception of the environment within the further, creating illusions or traps. He does not need to possess immediately. Instead, he slowly weakens the victims until they lose all resistance. He feeds on fear and despair, growing stronger as the victim falls deeper into hopelessness. He can cause loud bangs and noises to torment his prey. He is capable of forcefully pushing his victims, as he did when he made Quinn get hit by a car. He is not always visible, making him even more terrifying. He appears and disappears in the darkness, stalking his victim until it is too late. Despite his power, this demon is not invincible. There are ways to fight him and weaken his influence. Quinn's mother, Lilith, was able to protect her daughter and break the demon's connection with her. This suggests that strong emotional bonds can act as a shield against malevolent entities. Elise was able to face him directly in the further and expel him. Her inner light and mental resilience allowed her to challenge the demon and save Quinn. His power depends on keeping the victim trapped in fear and despair. If the victim regains their willpower, the demon loses his hold over them. Elise managed to force him out of the living world, proving that these entities are not omnipotent and can be defeated. And that would be everything we know so far about the entity known as the Man Who Can't Breathe, or the Wheezing Demon. The first time I saw this being, I thought the idea of such an entity was amazing. We've always heard stories about noises or strange occurrences in rooms that, curiously, are supposed to be uninhabited. This entity reminded me a lot of the spirit of the old man from The Conjuring 2, the one who supposedly possessed Janet. But let me know your opinion in the comments. Did you already know about the Man Who Can't Breathe or the Wheezing Demon? Do you think a creature like this could truly exist? And finally, if you found yourself in a situation similar to Quinn's, do you think you would have the strength to resist this entity? Share your answers to these questions and your general thoughts on the Man Who Can't Breathe or the Wheezing Demon from the Insidious universe. And if you have terrifying, strange, or eerie stories, I invite you to send me an email at dennisrowan@gmail.com to share your experience, so I can analyze it and feature it on the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, share it to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my new videos.